Again, so any attacks over the break? Any breaks during break? So remember what the CCA security game is. We will find out that ElGamal encryption is not chosen ciphertext attack secure. If we can ask for the decryption of something, which I'll hopefully get from you soon, we get something else from which we get M. So your task is now to fill in these 3 gaps without, volunteers? No volunteer yet? Well, I'll volunteer 1 value.
2C.
2C. Ah, that was a nice value. So, 2C. I'm a stupid oracle. 2C is very different from C. Different that thing. So I will go and decrypt. If you do decrypting 2C, then, well, there's a 2 here. There's a 2 here. There's a 2 here. There's a 2 there. So this gives us 2M. C would have also been valid. There are lots of valid possibilities. It is easiest to just keep the R and modify this because then you just get the same scalar here as well. There was a suggestion behind there of adding some ciphertexts. It's also possible to get the 2C as C plus C, and then you also end up with 2M. You can use this as a positive property. So you can use this constructively. If we want some additive homomorphism. So with RSA we have a multiplicative version, and here we get an additive version. So if you're taking R, C1 and plus, and I didn't put a 1 on the R. I have to use the same R for both of them, else this won't work. So you take R, C2. So both have the same randomness used. So both of them have the same R here, means the same key, the same K here. And then we're getting here, well, this can go out of the parentheses. So this one, decrypt to M1 plus M2, and I'll erase this thing here. Somebody put this in water, which is not right. So here, because, sorry, what I mean, what I mean here is, well, it's a plus with a quotation mark. What I mean is R, C1 plus C2. So this decrypts to M1 plus M2 because if I now take the decryption step, which takes the ciphertext, so that takes C1 plus C2, divides what comes in from the R to the power A, Now what we have here is in the C1, C2. C1 was Alice's public key, so that was G to the A to the same K times M, M1, plus G to the AK times M2, and then the whole thing divided by R to the A. R was G to the K, so we also have a G to the KA here. And then you can move out the parentheses, and then you're getting M1 plus M2 as a result. So if you want this, it's a nice property. Maybe you want to tally up some things, and so you need to add them. They're still encrypted. But most of the time, you want to avoid this. So then you can avoid it. This homomorphic property. Basically the same way as in RSA, so by insisting on some padding, so by forcing some formatting. And what that does, it basically links the message and the K that you have. And you can verify that this is a valid text. So then the oracle would go like, I'm getting this R,2C, haven't seen this before, let's decrypt this. Okay, decrypts. Now let's verify that these interdependencies which I'm supposed to check are valid, and then unless the people screwed up in how they define this formatting, that won't work. So then I would, as an oracle, say, sorry, your ciphertext was invalid, I don't talk to you. So then you will get your TM and the text lines. But I said, nowadays we don't actually want that, so modern solution is that we don't ask for an encryption, but we ask for something which is called a KEM. Okay, what is that? So don't ask for encryption, but for, it's called a key encapsulation mechanism. Because it's long, we usually speak of KEMs. If you have somebody talking about KEM-DEM, then they're talking about a key encapsulation, data encapsulation mechanism. Let's first focus on this KEM. What it does basically is a way to transport a key for symmetric crypto. And this transport might also be compute or agree upon, or, I mean, both sides can do something, or it could be one-sided. So there's no part in the KEM that needs to be agreed upon. Diffie-Hellman is a typical case, but it's not the only. So this key is then for symmetric crypto. A KEM looks pretty much like an encryption. So in encryption you have key generation, encryption, decryption. Now for key encapsulation you have key generation, that's your public key side, and then you have encapsulation and decapsulation. So there are three parts. To a KEM. So there's the key gen. What we're doing is we compute the secret key and the public key. there's the key encapsulation mechanism. So there's the enc, but this time not encryption, but encapsulation. So what we're doing is we take the public key and some randomness, and we're producing a session key. Let's call it a symmetric key. And I want to continue using little k for the one-time key, so this will be now a capital K symmetric key. Now that's something you want to use and keep secret. So this we keep local. And a ciphertext. Or key carrier. And that's what you send over, so the decapsulation says you should take, now it's a secret key of this site, and we're taking this capital C, and then we're producing the same symmetric key. So we're going to produce the same symmetric key K. So let's match this up for Diffie-Hellman. This is basically formalizing what we are doing in, say, semi-static Diffie-Hellman. Alice picks her secret key public key, so the key gen does the secret key is A, the public key is G to the A. Just the same as in Diffie-Hellman or in ElGamal before. The encapsulation is taking this G to the A, and it computes this capital K as the hash of this public key, so PK, to some key, little k, and produces the ciphertext, which is G to little k. So that was our R before. And then Alice, when she receives the ciphertext, can get the same capital K as well. So decap, Alice computes this hash of C to the A. Well, A is SK, so it should keep the same notation, so this is S. Yes? You can also take the Rsa Key Encryption System and cast it into a KEM DEM. So for Rsa, we have that the key gen gives you the SK, which is D and N, we should write N, D, and the public key is N, E. Then the encapsulation, now this is using the full machinery that we did with Rsa, so we're picking some randomness, and now instead of saying, oh, we want to encrypt a message, we pick a random M, and we maybe need some formatting. And then we have that this key is this M, and that the ciphertext is common to M to the E mod N. So the difference to the normal Rsa encryption is that here our message is not something that we want to encrypt, it's just something we pick in this process. And then decapsulation works the same way as decryption normally does. So it gets K as C to the D mod N. Already said but didn't write on the board. What we then use with this key is, well, normal symmetric crypto, and that's called the data encapsulation mechanism. So usually a KEM is used as part of a KEM DEM. Where DEM means data encapsulation mechanism which is just a fancy way of saying symmetric encryption and authentication. So symmetric encrypt and back. But KEM-DEM, you have to admit, sounds cooler. Also, makes you total snob when you go out in the street and say, oh yeah, I'm working on KEM-DEM, nobody understands what you're doing. And you know, oh, it can tell you, it stands for data encapsulation mechanism. And they still don't have any clue what you're doing. I mean, if you talk with some cryptographers who have been good cryptographers some 20 years ago, and somehow missed when everybody says, oh, we have to change notation, and you're like, what are you talking about? So I was talking with one of, well actually, I think I can name the name because it's not too embarrassing, so Phil Zimmerman, the guy who is like the main author of, I'll get back to you in a sec. I was talking with Phil Zimmerman from PGP. And we're talking about like this future crypto, like post-quantum that I mentioned. And he was like, yeah, but do you have a Diffie-Hellman? And I was like, well, do you really want Diffie-Hellman or do you want a KEM? No, I'm using Diffie-Hellman. So, depends on who you're talking to, they might not have this notation. However, it does capture the thing you want. It does capture that you have usually a big amount of data to transport, for which you want to use symmetric crypto, and that you somehow have to get the key. And you don't really care where the key comes from. It can be something that Bob picks. It can be something that comes from an interaction of Alice and Bob. It can be something in between. So TLS, for instance, uses basically RSA in this KEM form, but then this is just the pre-master key, and then they do, well, we don't want to rely purely on what Bob is sending, so they take this thing plus all kinds of public values. So they also would hash in Alice's public key and the ciphertext and some strings and something public that everybody knows, just to make it longer, just to make it more random. Yes?
In the encapsulation phase of the Diffie-Hellman, the hash of the pk to the power of k, but what is the k to the power of k?
Yeah, k is some random thing.
Oh, that's random.
So, find some color. Yeah, so k is just picked random. Yeah, so if I would have my sheet in front of me, I would be saying, first we pick some random k, then we compute this thing, then we compute that thing.
Okay.
So the typical thing for a KEM is that the encapsulation part takes some randomness and the public key. So for the RSA, I was careful, I picked the random message. Here I should have first said, we pick the k, then we compute these two things. Thanks for paying attention. I said you should pay attention today. Okay, so when you talk about KEM-DEM, it is the right thing to say. It's also what NIST now has been asking for, that people submit for post-quantum systems. However, it is not yet very common. So when you talk to people who do crypto because it's a day-to-day job, they probably haven't seen this. This is something that started with a paper involving Ronald Kramer from CWI, back then still Aarhus, and Victor Schub, back then IBM, and now New York, NYU. They redefined how we should do security proofs. Like, they made a big step of getting us out of the dark ages where like, well, we understand the math problem, and then yeah, stuff gets broken when you send me 2M. Well, let's just forbid you from sending 2M. Let's do some clumsy stuff like with PKCS version 1.5 that we saw the other time being broken with Bleichbach-Leitet. And they actually formalized this, and when you have this formalization, it's a lot nicer to make statements about it. Here's another one which is also from ElGamal, also Diffie-Hellman based, but not as outdated, so it's something which in variation still exists and is being used. It's named the ElGamal encryption, ElGamal signature scheme. One thing I've skipped over when I explained RSA, because I wanted to get to the math, I wanted to get to factorization and such things, was, well, we don't actually sign M. I was describing as a signature is M to the D. But I also said in the encryption part that the M has to be smaller than N. Now for encryption, we then discussed, yeah, okay, what you actually encrypt, just like here, is your secret key, and then it doesn't matter how long your message is. For the message, at this moment, what you do if you're signing a film. You could take your film and chop it up into chunks which are just smaller than the RSA key or smaller than your Diffie-Hellman key, but that's not very gratifying. So what we end up doing is, instead of signing the message itself, we sign the cryptographic hash of the message. So for ElGamal, I'll explain it in a moment, but let me first do some talking about the hash function. So here, and for RSA, we do not sign M directly, but we use but sign some hash of M. Now, this could be the normal hash function I mentioned in Chart 56 and Chart 3, but it could also be, depending on what your requirements are, well, the SHA gives you some strings and bytes or some strings and bits. You want an RSA, you want an integer. In this one, you'll want an integer. So let me underline hash here. So hash is a cryptographic hash function. And some encoding. And typically the encoding goes to an integer. So for example, to an integer. Now it's important that this is a cryptographic hash function. It's not just something which is shortened. It's not just signing the first page, but it's something where we expect that if anywhere on this huge several gigabyte files a single bit flips, then the signature will become invalid. So we want a cryptographic hash function for the properties that it's hard to find a pre-image and that it's hard to find collisions. So we need the hash properties that was second pre-image resistance, and we need collision resistance. Because if somebody asks you to sign, hey, yeah, I saw you at the course today, sure, I'll tell you to sign this, maybe you needed this because you couldn't see your partner or something. Yep, sign Tanja. If that message, which is innocent, hashes to the same as something like, oh yeah, I guarantee you attended this course, sign Tanja, these are very different messages, but they would hash to the same thing. I mentioned in context with the hash with the MD5 collisions, this Nostradamus attack that the Max Stevens-Ben de Vera and Achim Leinster were saying, oh, we can predict the election results. What they were actually doing is they were giving signatures on, well, different messages, because it was different people who were possibly winning, but then signing the hash of the message, and these messages were colliding. So this is because a signature on some M1 is also valid as signature on M2 if these collide. So if the hash of M1 is the same as the hash of M2, we must avoid these properties. So there's two versions. If you have found a collision, that means you have taken two messages that with a lot of work collide to the same thing. Then you have to trick me into signing one of them, and it will be valid as a signature on the other. That is when you have broken the collision resistance. If you were more powerful, remember that we analyzed collision resistance for length and hash function takes 2 to the n over 2 for the attack, whereas pre-image resistance would take 2 to the n, so that's much harder to break, but maybe there was something on the hash function. If you can do pre-images, then you just go back to some moment when I assigned something, because, well, hey, you get a PGP message from me, and if you then can find a second message which has the same hash, then you can take an already existing signature as a valid one on this. Now, there's a big gap between somebody has broken collision resistance to he can find two meaningful messages that collide. I mentioned, say, PDF files gives you more freedom. So, okay, collision resistance for MD5 and for SHA-1, this has been broken, but that still doesn't mean you could take any old signatures and apply them to something. So, because of this, we require collision resistance and second pre-image. Okay, so how does ElGamal sign a message? Signature setup again has the key generation, which is the same boring as always discrete log setup. So Alice sets up a key by picking an A and computing a public key as G to the A. Okay, that's what we expect when I say discrete log based. So let's write this down. Key gen SK is A, PK is G to the A. Now, how does signing works? I first need to give another name to something because I need the order of this group element. That's something which we didn't care about in Diffie-Hellman. And some of you came to me after the last lecture and were a little like, where do we actually use it as a group? We don't use anything fancy inverses or something. And yes, Diffie-Hellman never goes back, it just goes forward. There's a big difference between how RSA works in that computing to the E is undone by computing to the D, and the way that the decryption works here in ElGamal, where we're getting M back, but not by undoing the 2 to the power k, but we're getting it by undoing the multiplication. Or, well, we're doing the Diffie-Hellman by both computing the same way forward. There is no trapdoor. There is no way back. It's just another way forward in the Diffie-Hellman. So there are conceptual differences. Now, we never use anything of the group other than this way forward. We just use exponentiation. We just use repeated multiplication. So in principle, we could work in semi-group or what have you not. In the end, there are some proposals which are working in non-commutative groups, and they keep getting proposed and they keep getting broken. So in the end, we're stuck with commutative groups anyway, so might as well take a cyclic group. For signatures, we do need the order of this. So let's call this thing L. Let L be the order of G. And just as a reminder, that is the number of elements that are generated if I look at all the powers. So I look at all the powers of G and then take the cardinality of that set. This is like, you don't have to compute this in the signature step, this is just always there. But we haven't used it for anything yet, so I need to put it there. Then it starts, we pick a random k, and here it's very important to point out to use this only once. And then we compute R, which like before is G to the k, and we're computing the signature, well, the second part of the signature, and now this one will involve this L. So S is taking all of those as integers, so k inverse, and such will now be taken mod L, so here we're working mod into this group order, and we're taking the inverse of k times, and now I need to look into which order I put things. R hash. We're taking this R, which is here, so we're linking this together. Then we take the hash of the message times our secret key, so times A, and the whole thing mod L. I should note that there's a bunch of different ways of how we can put these, in which order you want them. That's why I had to go back to my sheet to see which one I chose here. So there are various ways to put the hash of M and R together here. And several of them are secure. Not all of them, but several of them. Okay, so then we want to verify. Now the verification needs to get Alice's public key. And now we want to see whether if we take, sorry. I need to still say what I'm sending. We're sending R, S as a signature. Okay, so then you want to verify well, we will certainly need the hash of the message, we will certainly need to get this A in there, and so what we're doing is we're computing R, which was part of the signature, R to the S, and then we're taking that minus, well, I'll just look with a smart sheet, and then R to the S minus, minus G to the R minus the public key of Alice to the hash of the message. Okay? And then we accept if this is 0. Okay, now when you design a system, you always have to prove that it works. So here we showed for the encryption system before the break that we get the message back if we have an ElGamal encryption, and then we decrypt. Here we have to show that we're getting a valid signature, well, something which passes if this was done properly. So a proper signature is accepted as valid. Because, so why? Let's start on the left side. Let's take R to the S. And I'll move this up a bit. The other board down so you can see the last line there. That's all the definitions. So R, that was G to the K. Now S, that was this long thing there. So that is K inverse times this parenthesis. So that's K inverse times R plus the hash of M times A now down here this is mod L. This computation takes place in the group. That is compatible because L is the order of G. So when you're computing powers of G, when you reach L, you're back to 0. I mean, you have 1, you have G squared until G to the L. Now the definition of order is that G to the L is the first power of G, so that you're back to 1, which is equal to 0. So you're inside your computation, you're implicitly reducing mod L. So this is an exponent of G so implicitly reduced mod L. If this was mod anything else, we would get total garbage. If I would have said, oh yeah, well, since we are in FP star, let's also reduce S mod P. You can't just reduce mod something and then hope it works up here. You could have reduced modulo a multiple of L. So if you don't want to go through the effort of computing what the order of G really is, you could say, well, we know that L divides P minus 1, and so it can define this S modulo P minus 1. But then you run into problems that P minus 1, well, definitely is not prime because 2 will divide it. And if this expression ends up being even, then you have a problem. So I was already motivating last time with the decision Diffie-Hellman that we want to have a prime order subgroup, so L will be prime. And here, for this computation, it's convenient that it's prime. Well, for that computation, it's convenient that it's prime because then the inversion won't fail. Here it's just making sure that what we're saying here is reasonable. Now there are lots of simplifications. I have K times K inverse. So these two guys here cancel. And then what I'm left with is G to the R. Well, it's kind of nice because that's the next thing I'm going to subtract from it. And then I have G to the A times H of M. So R plus, well, I write it here as G to the A, putting this parentheses, outside parentheses, the hash of m. Now G to the A, that is Alice's public key. And I now realize it would work if I hadn't made a typo. This thing here is a product, not a minus. Okay, so if I'm computing R to the S, then what I'm getting is G to the R times the public key, the hash of M. Those are exactly the things I'm subtracting here. So I'm getting 0 for valid signature. So this is what I subtracted. Okay. I'm telling this stuff that it's kind of old, really, like decrypt 76, ElGamal early 80s. This stuff is actually used pretty much like this. There are some improvements, well, some size improvements. And then you're getting what is called DSA, which is used on the internet a lot. And then if you apply this to other groups, for instance, you're getting easy DSA. Those are basically the setup that you've just seen, so the ElGamal signature, with using a little bit about like how hard the attacks are. I've been hinting at Diffie-Hellman in fine fields not being as secure as baby step, giant step, so we use RSA sizes, but we could be working in a small subgroup. And so one of the space improvements or size improvements I wrote is that your L is going to be much, much smaller. So L is, for instance, 256 bits, while you're working with a prime, which is 3000 bits. And then we can do some tweaks in how you arrange the parts so that R is also shorter. So the default would be that the R would still have 3000 bits, the S would have 256 bits, and in DSA it is changed so that also R has only 256 bits. But apart from those modifications, it's exactly what we're seeing here. So we've pretty much caught up with reality today, so that's a good time for doing Christmas break. After Christmas, the first week of lectures is no week of lectures. So there are no lectures in the week starting with the 8th. There are lectures in the week starting with the 15th. I got some people saying, hey, how horrible is it? Are you still torturing us with new material on the Thursday before the new exam? No, I will do some new material on the Monday. Then we have a normal exercise session on the Thursday. So 15th is going to be normal lecture. The Thursday is going to be exercises on what you've done now, plus what I'm doing on that Monday. And then the last 2 hours, I'm repurposing from lecture to exercises into basically ask me anything about the old exams. So, if they don't know what to do over Christmas, like your parents say, come and sing a song with us, and you're like, no, I have to be busy. Shit, what can I do? There are lots of old exams online. So I put all the exams that I've done for this one. You can just go for them, see what is expected for you. And if you send me an email, where you say, hey, exercise 5, I think it's 15 as a solution, here's what I will be doing, I will send you feedback. So I'm not putting model solutions online, but I'm totally willing to send you feedback. Plus there is the general class on that Thursday. All right, with that, best for the next year, and hope to see you happy and so on the 15th of January 2018.